What I originally intended to do was to cover 4 areas. Firstly, the illegal nature of the wars with Iraq and Afghanistan. Secondly, the war crimes that have been committed. Thirdly, I want to single out the offenders, that's Britain's war criminals. And lastly, I want to outline what we can do to stop the killing. I expect to take about 20 minutes, so then we'll get on with things after that, but there will be a few opportunity for questions. So just to summarise what has happened, firstly, on October the 7th, 2001, Tony Blair informed the British people that we were at war with Afghanistan, and we were using submarine-launched missiles to attack Kabul. We've been fighting there ever since, and we have now killed at least 50,000 totally innocent Afghan civilians. The second thing is, on March the 18th, 2003, Parliament voted for the war and took the illegal decision to invade and occupy Iraq. The war led to the destruction of Iraq and the deaths of at least 1 million Iraqis, including 300,000 children. Now, it's those 2 facts, in a sense, that stimulate the need for something to happen in Parliament to get things moving. These 2 massacres are, without doubt, the worst atrocities in British history. If you go back over history, you will never find another occasion when we have killed 300,000 children. Now, when you kill somebody because of their nationality, in law, that's a crime of genocide. And what I want to make quite absolutely clear tonight is that the British government and our leaders have been committing genocide in both Afghanistan and Iraq ever since we went in there on those 2 dates. Now, shortly before the war with Iraq, the Prime Minister and the Attorney General assured Parliament that the war with Iraq would be legal, on the grounds that it had been authorised by the Security Council. That claim is totally false. Not only is it false, it is deceptive and misleading. And I want to go through some of the evidence to show you why that is the case. The memorandum to Parliament from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office claimed, and I quote, "The legal basis for any military action against Iraq would be the authorization which the Security Council, by its Resolution 678, gave to member states to use all necessary means to restore international peace and security in the area. That authorization was suspended but not terminated by Security Council Resolution 687 and revived by Security Council Resolution 1441. Now, it's on the basis of that statement that we have murdered 1 million people. And I want to make absolutely clear that it is false in a number of different ways, in at least 6 ways. Firstly, the UN is for peacekeeping, not war-making. It is forbidden from using armed force. Article 41 of the UN Charter states quite clearly, the Security Council may decide what measures, not involving the use of armed force, are to be employed to give effect to its decisions. Now that couldn't be clearer. Number 2, Security Council resolutions are the operating objectives of the Security Council. They are not the law, and they do not apply to states operating without Security Council authorization. The UN Charter is the law, and it states, states must settle their states must settle their international disputes by peaceful means, and they are forbidden from, quote, the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. That is the law. Number 4, Resolution 678 referred to the expulsion of Iraqi forces from Kuwait in 1991, and it ceased to apply when Iraq was forced out and a ceasefire was agreed. 5. The Security Council had just rejected the infamous second resolution put forward by Britain and America and had refused to authorise the use of armed force. Resolution 1441 gave Iraq a chance to prove that it had complied with its disarmament obligations. It did not authorise the revival of Resolution 678, which is what the government informed us and Parliament. So those are 6 reasons why that legal advice was false. Now let's turn to the deceptions in the Attorney General's advice. The reason it is deceptive is that because it fails to mention the laws of war. If a lawyer is asked for legal advice on the use of armed force and his advice fails to mention the principal laws and prohibitions that govern its use, he is negligent and culpable in law for the consequences. Of the 10 main war laws omitted from the advice, I want to mention just 4 tonight. The others are listed in the pack that I've given out. The first is the Treaty for the Renunciation of War. Now, this is the single most important law the world has ever signed. 63 nations signed up and promised never to go to war again. I can't find a single member of the government or Parliament who knew about or knows about now the Treaty for the Renunciation of War. I find that horrific. And it picks up Elfyn's point that people do not know the laws of war. It's known as the Kellogg-Briand Pact. And it renounced war and promised to settle all future disputes peacefully. It's important because it was the first treaty outlawing war, and it formed the legal basis for the Nuremberg war crimes trials in 1946, at which Germany's leaders were convicted of 11 breaches of the Kellogg-Briand Pact. The second is the UN Charter. Now, this is, as everybody knows, the most important, the premier war law, in which Britain and all the 192 member states agreed never to threaten or attack another state, to settle all disputes peacefully, to respect human rights, to uphold the law, and to act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood and cooperation. And we signed that. The third is the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. This was signed in 1998. 108 nations have ratified it, and it sets up the world's first permanent criminal court in The Hague. This court has ultimate jurisdiction over the universal crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and conduct ancillary to such crimes. So that's 6 international offences which you can be charged with and tried at The Hague, and I hope it's going to work. The fourth and last one that I want to bring out tonight is the International Criminal Court Act 2001. Now, this should really have been called the Genocide, Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act. But it wasn't, and that is a mistake, so nobody understands that that is what it is about. It is the ratification of the International Criminal Court and the introduction of those crimes into British English criminal law, English and Welsh criminal law. There was also the International Criminal Court Scotland Act, which applies to Scotland. So that's a very brief summary of the laws of war. You'll find the other ones mentioned in the documentation. So let's move on and ask why the government's legal advice was misleading. Not only was it deceptive, but it was thoroughly misleading. Because the Attorney General failed to inform all those taking part in the war of the personal consequences of breaching war law. He failed to point out that any resident of Britain who takes part in an illegal war of aggression bears full responsibility in law for the consequences. He should have pointed out that if one or more Iraqi citizens suffer injury or death at the hands of coalition armed forces, then everyone involved, whether or not they were present at the time of death, is criminally liable under the doctrine of joint enterprise for genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, a crime against peace, murder, incitement to murder, and conspiracy to murder. Let's move on to the second area, the war crimes. What actually happened? When coalition forces invaded Iraq, they used modern, indiscriminate, high-explosive weapons of mass destruction, such as cruise missiles, rockets, cluster bombs, mortars, and depleted uranium shells against villages, towns, and cities throughout Iraq, killing and injuring thousands of men, women, and children.